Have you ever wished that you could be an instant winner of a $1 million McDonald's Monopoly prize? Do you remember the feeling of peeling the Monopoly game ticket off the box of medium fries, hoping that your ticket would change your life, only to have a wave of dissatisfaction sweep over you as you realize that you are the winner of a McDouble once again? Well, it turns out there was a big reason no one you knew ever won the big prizes in the McDonald's Monopoly games of the 80s and 90s. The entire game was rigged by a man known as Jerome, Uncle Jerry Jacobson, who stole over $24 million in prizes from McDonald's games over the course of 12 years. This is the story of McFraud. In the year 1987, McDonald's started one of their most ambitious and successful marketing campaigns to date. Every purchase of their top-selling items, from fries, Big Macs, and large drinks, gave you the chance to win Monopoly prizes from the Monopoly stickers that were on the packaging. Each one of these game pieces could win you a prize ranging from free food to potentially $1 million if you collected the correct pieces. Now, with a grand prize of $1 million, McDonald's had to use a third party to create and distribute the pieces to make sure none of the McDonald's employees tried to cheat. The company responsible for this was Simon Marketing, whose head of security was a man named Jerry Jacobson. As head of security, it was his job to make sure no winning game pieces were ever stolen or tampered with. Now, in the beginning, Jerry ran a tight ship. He used his ex-cop training to keep the factory on point that made the game pieces, and even went as far as to check factory workers' shoes as they left the location to make sure they weren't trying to smuggle out game pieces. However, by 1989, for reasons unknown, Jerry had a change of heart, and the temptation got the best of him. He snuck out a game piece for $25,000 and gave it to his stepbrother to cash the prize when he met up with him at a family wedding. After that, Jerry laid low for a few years and diligently provided the security for the game pieces for Monopoly and other sweepstakes that McDonald's and other companies ran. It wasn't until 1995 that he began his heist again. In that year, Simon Marketing did a random computer drawing to determine which factory would create the McDonald's Monopoly pieces for the upcoming year. However, the random factory picked was in Canada, and Simon Marketing did the drawing again until the computer picked an American factory that they could have more control over. Jerry, now feeling the whole system was rigged, had no reservations about stealing game pieces after that, and went all in on rigging the entire game. Jerry started giving out winning pieces for cars, cash, and vacations to family members at first, and eventually created a whole organization working with mobsters, drug traffickers, and even a psychic. One of Jerry's mob associates, another man named Jerry Colombo, was even featured in a McDonald's commercial after cashing in a stolen game piece to win a car. For over 12 years, people in Jerry's McFraud network won almost every single grand prize in the Monopoly giveaways, and one key to avoiding suspicion that Jerry did was that occasionally he would give out random winning pieces to people he would meet. In one situation, he even gave out the $1 million winning prize to St. Jude's Hospital. One time, Jerry met a couple on a cruise ship and ended up giving them a winning ticket. Another time, Jerry sold a $10,000 winning piece to a butcher for just $2,000 in cash. On many occasions, Jerry would have the people he gave the winning pieces to cash them in on different states. He didn't want to arouse suspicion if all the winning pieces were being cashed in around where he lived. Now, despite his caution, eventually the FBI caught on to Jerry. In the late 90s, they began to circle in on his organization. Eventually, they began to close their web around him with a wiretap on a few phones and tailing a few cars of his associates. By the year 2000, the FBI felt they had enough to go after his Jerry and his ring of McThieves. The FBI soon approached McDonald's to work with them to bring the whole McCrime ring to a close. But at this time, McDonald's had actually planned on stopping the Monopoly game after they found one of their employees try and steal over 3,000 game pieces from a store. But with the FBI's urging, they allowed it to go on for one more cycle to catch Jerry and his crew. Now, the FBI and McDonald's decided to visit the winner of the 2001 grand prize winner for $1 million. His name was Michael Hoover, and the FBI went to his house posing as a film crew and interviewed the guy. And quickly over the course of the interview, they realized this guy was in on the scam with Jerry, and they were able to flip the guy and get him to turn in Jerry and his whole crew, and this began the downfall of Jerry's McScheme. Over the next few weeks, the FBI arrested over 50 people related to Jerry's McCrime ring, and Jerry himself was eventually sentenced to 37 months in prison and forced to pay back $12.5 million in restitution to McDonald's. Almost everyone else involved in the scheme was convicted of mail fraud and conspiracy to defraud McDonald's. Most of them ended up serving minor prison sentences or had to pay back McDonald's for the prizes stolen. Now, the arrest of Jerry and the trial took place in mid-September of 2001. It was a big story at the time until it eventually was overshadowed by the events of September 11th. McDonald's was eventually sued by customers who had spent lots of money trying to win the prizes, and McDonald's did eventually pick new winners and give out new prizes. But the damage had been done. The companies Simon Marketing and McDonald's both ended up suing each other and never worked together again. McDonald's stopped doing the Monopoly game for several years after all the bad press it received, but a few years later, with a new ad agency and new security measures, they brought it back. Now, many people to this day still think the game is rigged, and perhaps it is, but ultimately I'm going to leave that question up to you. Do you think justice was served in this case, and do you think potentially the Monopoly game at McDonald's is still rigged?